Hey there, viewers. Some moments were never meant to be seen, but the camera never stopped rolling. Diddy forgot it was on while he was alone with his adopted daughter, and what the footage shows has left everyone disturbed. Let's get into it. Routine maintenance. I don't read into anything unless it's got sparks or smoke coming out of it. That's how I've made it this long at MDC Brooklyn. You show up, you clock in, you patch what needs patching, and you keep your damn mouth shut. That's the job. I ain't trying to get promoted. I sure as hell ain't trying to be noticed. And I don't read into anything unless it's got sparks or smoke coming out of it. They had me on routine maintenance today. Nothing urgent, just some rewiring on an old analog junction near the back hall. Holding room 4C. Most of the younger guys don't even know it exists. The newer layout doesn't even include it on the active security map, and the digital schematics skip right over it like it ain't even there. But us old-timers, we remember. That room used to be for private interviews, high prototypes, sealed sessions, mostly forgotten now. I hadn't set foot near it in over 4 years. The work order didn't come from our usual system. Usually I get tickets from maintenance intake or facility control. This one was tagged straight from the Federal Compliance Office, internal routing code FCO7C, which I ain't never seen before. The message said, plain and cold, reconnect legacy camera line for testing, holding room 4C. Do not erase buffer memory. I ain't gonna lie, that last part made me pause. We don't keep buffers for disconnected cameras. That's the whole point of cutting them. No data, no memory, no footprint. But I figured it was just one of them CYA audit moves. Maybe someone's checking for evidence mishandling. Maybe a judge got curious, who knows. So I hauled my toolbox down to sub-level 2, found the panel behind the old interrogation suite wall, and started tracing cables. The analog line was dusty but intact. I replaced the fuse, patched the coax through our bridge node, and routed the feed back to a test terminal. I didn't expect anything to come through. Most times when we hook these up, all we get is static, ghost signals. But this time, there was something. The screen didn't flicker, didn't buzz, didn't give me the usual error message. It just went black for a second, then loaded a single file. The label wasn't standard. None of the date stamps were formatted right. It just said, section _4, C_family MP4. My stomach turned a little. Not fear, exactly. Just that weird sense that something ain't where it's supposed to be. Family? That ain't terminology we use. We got interview, segregation, compliant witness, or protective session. Never family. I clicked play. At first, it was just the room. Gray walls, bad paint job, overhead buzz from the fluorescents. Same broken vent in the top corner. Same bolted down table with the scuffed corners. One chair on each side. The room was empty. Then the door opened, and in walked Diddy. Real name Sean Combs, but in here he's just inmate 37,452.54. He didn't look like he usually does on the monitors. There was no confidence in his walk. No lean, no swagger. Just tired, heavy steps, like something was weighing down his spine. He sat in the far chair, just sat. No fidgeting, just breathing. I watched him for almost 4 minutes, just sitting there. Then something caught his attention. The camera didn't pan. This was a fixed lens, but he looked to his right. The door creaked open again. That's when she walked in. Teenage girl, small frame, dark hoodie, jeans, hair pulled back. No expression, no words. She didn't even look at him right away. She just walked in, sat across from him, and placed her hands on her lap. I didn't recognize her. Couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17 tops. Not one of his known kids. Not from what I'd seen in the tabloids or the inmates' visitor logs. And yet, the way he looked at her. It was like he was waiting to be judged. The file had skips in it, like old VHS tapes where the magnetic strip starts to peel. One moment she was sitting still, and the next there'd be a slight twitch, or her head would shift just a bit too quickly. Every time it happened, Diddy would flinch, like the tape itself was hurting him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. Looked like a notebook, worn, leather-bound, pages sticking out like feathers. He slid it across the table. "You remember this, don't you?" he said. His voice was low. I turned the volume up to max, and even then it was barely audible. The mic must have been cheap or damaged, but the words came through clear enough. The girl didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Instead, she opened the notebook, flipped past pages like she knew exactly what she was looking for, stopped on one, tilted it toward him just slightly. He leaned forward, and that's when the camera glitched again. For a split second, the screen cut to black. When it returned, the room looked slightly different. No shadows under the table, no reflection in the observation window. But they hadn't moved. Diddy had tears in his eyes. "I didn't know they'd let you in," he said. "I didn't think you'd remember." Still, she didn't speak. Just closed the notebook and placed it between them. Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, I noticed. There was a scar above her left brow, faint but fresh. The feed glitched again. This time, the audio dropped completely. What followed was 30 seconds of pure static, both visual and sound. When the feed came back, the girl was gone. He was sitting alone, staring at the notebook. I backed the footage up, tried to re-watch the part where she left, but the system locked up. The playback bar froze. I tried to pause, tried to scroll. Nothing worked. So I exited the video. That's when my terminal started flashing. Warning, playback loop detected. Evidence preserved for internal rehearsal. I didn't know what that meant. We don't have any protocol for internal rehearsal. That ain't a term in any of our systems. I checked the back-end logs. The file wasn't listed. No timestamp, no storage ID. It was running off an internal buffer, temporary memory. I picked up the phone to call my supervisor. Didn't even get a dial tone. Just dead air. I tried again. Same thing. Then the terminal beeped once more. A final message appeared. Session active, rehearsal ongoing, viewer logged. I stood up from my chair, looked around. The control room was empty, just me. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like someone was watching me watch. The weirdest part? I never touched the camera feed again, but every time I passed by the terminal that week, the screen would flash for half a second and show that same still. Diddy, alone, staring at that notebook. And once, just once, I swear I saw something else. Behind him, in the mirror, a girl holding a pencil, drawing something, and smiling. Chapter 2. She isn't on the list. It was already shaping up to be a strange week before I even saw the folder. Mondays in the pre-trial documentation office usually run like clockwork. I'd get in around 7:45, grab the same lukewarm coffee from the break room that nobody cleans, and start cross-referencing names on the master docket with approved witness files. It's not glamorous work, but it keeps things from falling apart when the court hits full swing. Defense can't cry foul about surprise witnesses if the paperwork's tight, and judges like it when things move smooth. Paperwork is my lane. Neat, structured, dependable. That morning was different. I noticed it the second I logged into the case archive for the federal continuation trial, Combs v. United States, scheduled to resume in 3 weeks. A few new files had been routed in from the Internal Compliance Division, not from the standard queue either. These were fed in through something labeled FCO Tier 7, Internal Addendum. No sender, no request date, just a digital signature I didn't recognize, and a 6-digit routing code I'd never seen. That's already a red flag in our system. Files don't just appear, they have to be requested, scheduled, recorded. We track every click, and yet there it was. A folder named Supplemental Witness Baroni Ava. I blinked at the screen. I knew that name. Not from a legal filing, but from somewhere else. Months ago, there were viral whispers, social media videos about a girl Diddy once referred to as his adopted daughter, but it was never official. I remembered the articles correcting it, saying she wasn't legally adopted, just someone taken in, maybe temporarily. After Kim Porter died, people said Diddy brought Ava into his home, but then she vanished. Now her name was here, logged in our internal evidence flow, like she was scheduled to take the stand. Only she wasn't on any list I had. I double-checked everything. There was no 302 form submitted, no legal signature, no protective order shielding her identity, not even an official intake form for her as a potential federal witness. And that's impossible. There are protocols. Federal court doesn't just allow people to show up in courtrooms with no paper trail. But it got stranger. Inside the folder, instead of a photo, there was a sketch. Graphite pencil on white paper, scanned. It showed a young girl, Ava, if I was placing it right, from a 3/4 angle. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, a small scar over her left brow. But it wasn't the face that froze me. It was the background. The drawing wasn't random. It was drawn from a specific location, a corner view from my office. I could see my cluttered desk lamp in the sketch, my hanging plant that's half dead, even the broken keycard scanner I've taped over with a sticky note. It was all there, down to the tiny chipped corner of the ceiling tile above the doorway. She had been here. I dropped the folder and just sat there for a second, trying to understand what that meant. It wasn't possible. My office is restricted access. Visitors need escort clearance. You can't just wander in and out of the administrative wing. There are cameras, logs, sign-in sheets. Except apparently not for her. I reopened the file and started searching for attached metadata. That's when I found the internal note. One that hadn't been routed through normal memo channels. It wasn't signed, wasn't dated, and had no traceable author. Just a plain text note buried in the scan. She will appear, but not testify. Compliance Tier 7. Masked witness. Watch the vent. Watch the vent? I stood up. My eyes moved across the room, landing on the metal vent above the filing cabinets. It was slightly crooked, just enough to notice. I hadn't given it much thought before. Dust made everything look half broken around here, but now I couldn't stop staring at it. I pulled the filing cabinet away from the wall, climbed onto the chair, and looked inside the vent. Nothing, just cobwebs and filtered air. Still, the message was burned into my mind. Masked witness. Watch the vent. I wasn't crazy. This girl, Ava, had somehow entered the administrative floor, stood in my office long enough to sketch the entire space, and left without triggering a single alert. I needed to know more. I accessed the internal surveillance archive. We're only allowed to pull footage up to 3 days back without a court order, but there are workarounds. I entered the date range, 3 nights ago, and selected the corridor outside the sealed evidence room. At first it was just empty halls, janitors, security passing through. Then, at 2:14 a.m., the camera caught something. A figure. Small frame, hoodie up, sketchbook clutched in one hand. The girl moved calmly, like she knew exactly where she was going. No hesitation, no glancing over her shoulder. She didn't even look at the camera. And here's the thing that chilled me to the bone. The system tried to blur her face. Tried. But the blur wasn't like facial redaction software. It was deeper, like the system itself couldn't resolve her image, as if her features refused to render. It wasn't pixelated. It was empty, hollow, like she wasn't captured by the lens at all, but some afterimage the hardware couldn't comprehend. The blur pulsed once. Then the screen glitched. The timestamp reset, then jumped ahead. I ran the footage again. Same result. I sat back down, heart pounding. I looked again at the sketch. The shading, the perspective, the lines. It wasn't just observation, it was intentional. Whoever drew that picture didn't just want to document the room. They wanted me to know they were here, that they'd watched, that they remembered. And now I had the file. I thought about reporting it. I should have. But something told me no one would believe me. Worse, I wasn't sure I wanted them to. I was afraid of what else I'd find if they started digging. Ava Baroni wasn't on the list. 15 Seconds was in the building. Cheap and here. And somehow the system itself didn't know how to record her. That night, before I left the office, I looked under my desk. Taped to the underside was a small piece of paper, folded once, perfectly. Inside, a hand-drawn sketch. It was me, sitting at my desk, holding this very paper. Chapter 3, Legacy Footage. The building for 6 years, and I still don't know who signs my checks. Some people upstairs wear name tags and suits. Others just drift in and out, no ID badge, no signature on any system log. You learn real fast not to ask questions. Not if you want to keep your job, especially if you work on the archive floor. They tell people I'm an editor. Technically, that's true. My title is Assistant Technician, Internal Media Review, Level 2, but all that means is I make things clean. I take the raw footage, surveillance, court feeds, recorded depositions, and I redact the unacceptable. Not in the flashy Hollywood way. I don't blur faces or cut scenes. I make things permissible, usable, neat enough to pass through the funnel so the defense team gets a controlled narrative and nobody sues for prejudicial handling. It's not art, it's memory management. That morning, my cue list had 6 flagged items from the federal case against Sean Combs. 2 standard courtroom feeds, 1 intake video, 1 chain of custody login tape, 1 deposition, and 1 anomaly. It was flagged in a different font than everything else. The file name was off, too. Normally, we get structured labels like session_12A_ plaintiff depot, or camera3_hallway_B2_4_22, but this one just said security footage, family visitation, unauthorized. No date, no metadata, no origin tag, just a 13-minute clip in gray font with a warning stamp underneath it. Class 3, hold, do not externalize. I almost skipped it. But curiosity is poison in this job, and I've always been a little weak to the taste. The first frame opened to a wide-angle view of holding room 4C. The timestamp blinked erratically in the corner, like it couldn't decide what time it wanted to belong to. It kept resetting, then reloading. The only thing that didn't glitch was the room itself. Cold walls, gray table, twin metal chairs, observation window dark behind the glass. And then, him. Diddy entered from the left, shoulders rounded, sleeves rolled, his jaw twitching like he hadn't slept. He moved like someone used to being in control of a room, but who didn't quite trust the air anymore. He didn't sit right away, just stood there for a while, pacing. Then he finally sank into the chair on the far side of the table. He stared ahead, motionless, like waiting for something. Then she walked. Small frame, hoodie drawn, sketchbook pressed flat against her ribs like a shield. I didn't need a title card to know who she was. That was Ava Baroni. She didn't speak. Not once, not a single movement that said she was there for a conversation. She sat across from him and placed her hands on the table, careful, like she was afraid of leaving fingerprints. He tried to smile. It didn't stick. "I didn't think they'd let you through," he said. She just stared. "I asked them not to make you come," he added, softer this time. Again, nothing. That's when he pulled something from his pocket. A familiar shape. That same notebook. The leather cover bent at the corners. Elastic band stretched thin. He set it on the table, slowly, like he was laying down evidence. "You remember this, don't you?" Still, she didn't react. The footage flickered once, but the image didn't break. What changed was him. His face, his posture. He started leaning in harder, his voice picking up speed, tone shifting from warmth to something tight, nervous. "I told them this room was wrong for this. I told them this isn't what we used it for, not before. This was 6C, remember?" A pause. "Did they tell you what this room used to be?" The lights dimmed. Not a full blackout, just a flicker, like the bulbs remembered another voltage. The camera buzzed and realigned itself, though no one had touched it. The image jumped forward 6 frames, then reset. Ava was standing now, still hadn't spoken. She held the pencil in her right hand, moving it slowly in the air like she was sketching without paper. Her fingers rotated in small, deliberate arcs. Then she leaned over the table and began drawing, but I couldn't see what. The camera angle didn't capture the surface, only her movements. Sharp lines, then circles, then something that looked like a spiral, etched in invisible ink. Diddy's breathing got louder, audible. His shoulders trembled. He pressed both palms on the table and leaned forward, as if trying to stop her hand. "Don't," he said. "Not here." The video stuttered again, frame lag. The timestamp disappeared entirely. And that's when I hit pause. I don't even know why. Maybe because I couldn't shake the feeling I'd seen this exact movement before. Not in court, not in footage. In real life, in the hallways, in the margins of a form someone once slid across my desk. That same gesture, spiral motion with a pencil, like she was recording something that hadn't happened yet. I tried to export the clip. The export window loaded halfway, then froze. No error message, just a static bar refusing to complete. I minimized the export dialog and moved the playhead forward manually, dragging through frame by frame to see if I could spot the moment where things started to fall apart. At the end of the timeline, there was something strange. A still image, labeled "Playback Ready." I double-clicked. It wasn't part of the footage. It was a composite render, like the system had taken the existing frames and generated a mock-up. What showed on screen was a courtroom. Ours, but with odd distortions. All the figures were seated, judge, jury, bailiff, stenographer, but their faces were blurred into smooth, featureless ovals. Even Diddy, even the lawyers. Every person in the image had been erased down to basic geometry, except one. In the back corner, behind the glass barrier reserved for press, was a single face, sharp, detailed. It was me, sitting at a monitor, editing this footage. The reflection in the glass showed the same scene I was looking at, but in the reflection my eyes were closed. I slammed the program shut. Hard to shut down. Pulled the plug on the terminal. The hum of the archive floor returned, just fans, distant footsteps, elevator clicks. I sat there for a long time, listening, not thinking, just listening. There are no cameras in the editing suite. That's by design. This is supposed to be the safe zone, the place where nothing gets recorded because everything has already been seen. But I swear, before I left, I saw something on the far wall. Barely visible, faint. A pencil mark. A spiral. Chapter 4. Prom dresses and panic attacks. I didn't think any of it meant anything at first. I'm just a regular senior trying to survive calculus and make it to graduation without my mom going through my phone again. I don't party like some people. I'm not famous. But I do hang out with people who are, which honestly has always felt like being backstage at a show I wasn't invited to. Jesse and Delilah Combs go to my school, and somehow over the last couple years I became their friend. Not best friends. We didn't sleep over or anything like that. But I was there for late-night FaceTimes and hallway dance videos and most recently prom. That's when things got weird. It started maybe 2 weeks before the dance. I noticed they were acting off. Not nervous about dresses off, but like something else was weighing on them. Jessie kept checking her phone every couple minutes, like she was waiting for a text that never came. Delilah started carrying this little notebook everywhere. She wouldn't let anyone open it. Even joked once that it belonged to someone else. I thought it was just a boy thing or maybe something about the tribe. Yeah, everyone at school knew what was going on with their dad. We weren't allowed to talk about it, but we all did when they weren't around. But then Delilah said something strange. We were in the dressing room at that boutique over on Flatbush, picking out gowns. The three of us were standing in front of the big mirror, trying to decide if the red was too much, and Jessie had just stepped out for a call. Delilah looked at our reflections, quiet for a second, then said, "She used to be our sister, I think." I asked what she meant. She just shrugged. Adopted or something, I don't remember it all, but she was around. I asked her who. She didn't answer. When Jessie came back, she didn't even look up. Just grabbed a new dress and asked if it came in gold. That night they invited me over to help pack their accessories. Prom was a big deal for them. They had stylists and shoes and drivers and all that, but they still wanted to pick their own bags. Jessie had 3 clutches laid out on her bed. We all picked one and started filling it with stuff. Lip gloss, mints, tissues. I reached for one and paused. There was a folded piece of paper inside, like someone had stashed it before the bag was zipped up. I pulled it out, thinking it was a receipt or something, but it wasn't. It was a sketch, drawn in pencil, rough but detailed. It showed 2 girls walking down a courthouse hallway. You could tell by the benches and the paneling. The weird thing was, one of the girls looked exactly like Delilah. Same high ponytail, same long legs. The other could have been Jessie, except she was missing from the frame, cut off halfway through, like she had vanished mid-step. There was a third figure in the background, just a shadow, sitting on a bench, watching. I asked them if they had drawn it. They froze. Jessie snatched it from my hand and shoved it into her pocket. Delilah stared at me like I'd just said something in a language they didn't speak. "We didn't draw that," Jessie said. "It was just in the bag. Leave it alone." The rest of the night was awkward. I left early. Prom came and went. The twins wore matching red gowns. They looked stunning. Everyone said so. Their pictures blew up on Instagram. No one would have guessed anything was wrong. But I noticed the way Delilah kept glancing over her shoulder in the limo, or the way Jessie stayed off her phone the entire night. At one point, while we were dancing, Delilah whispered in my ear, "He's gonna sit behind us, just watch." They let her in. I thought she meant someone from school was trying to crash their party. But there was no one behind us, just the DJ booth. That was the last normal conversation we ever had. A week later, I stopped by their house to drop off a shoebox Delilah had left in my locker. She'd asked me to bring it back to her. Something about it having old jewelry in it she needed for graduation. I opened it just to make sure nothing had broken. There wasn't any jewelry inside. Just a single USB drive, no label, black casing, taped shut. I almost texted her to ask what it was, but something told me not to. That night, I plugged it into my laptop. Only one file was on it. Section 4C, Final Rehearsal. I didn't open it. I don't know why. I think I was scared. The name gave me chills. Final Rehearsal. like something that wasn't supposed to happen again. Or something that already had, but hadn't been seen the right way. Instead, I messaged someone I follow on Discord. He runs this channel where he analyzes leaked evidence from high-profile cases, real, low-key, deep web kind of stuff. I asked him if he'd take a look at it. I didn't even tell him where I got it, just said it was a file someone gave me from court evidence. He messaged back 2 hours later. "Where did you get this? Don't tell anyone else you have this. Delete every copy, now." I blocked them. I never opened it. The next day at school, Jesse and Delilah didn't look at me. They passed me in the hallway without saying a word. No wave, no smile, just cold. Like I wasn't real anymore. I tried texting. Nothing. DMs, read, no reply. I went by their house once. A different driver met me at the gate. Said they weren't taking visitors, not even classmates. I haven't spoken to them since. Sometimes, when I think back on that night, prom night, I remember the flash of a camera, the way the lights from the ceiling cast weird shadows across the walls of the dance hall, how the shadows behind us looked taller than they should have been, like someone else was standing just a few inches out of frame. I didn't say anything then, but now, I keep that USB in the bottom of a locked drawer. I haven't thrown it out, I haven't watched it, but I dream about what might be on it. And in the dreams, she always looks straight at me. She doesn't blink. She just draws the red marker. It was after hours when I found the drawer. I'd stayed late to finish the compliance audit. No one really tells you what that job entails. Internal oversight sounds official enough on paper, but what it really means is crawling through footage and files that were never meant to see daylight. We aren't told what to look for. We're told what shouldn't exist. Any footage with unexplained edits. Any witness with no corresponding subpoena. Any asset without chain of custody. And most importantly, anything that got duplicated without permission. Especially now, with the trial heating up and the defendant's name on every screen in the building, people are jumpy. And when people are jumpy, they make mistakes. Or worse, they try to cover them. I was assigned to comb through a sealed locker in Evidence Control Subsector D, behind the old Trial Review Wing, an area only accessed now for legacy storage. My case sheet listed it as Routine Leak Prevention, Tier 4 Sensitive, but the routing tag gave me pause. 4C6C Legacy Threat. The name meant nothing to me at first, until I opened the drawer. The files inside weren't just sealed, they were locked behind a manual mechanism, a brass latch with a numbered cylinder lock that hadn't been used in years. Our offices are digital now, but this one was stubbornly analog, like it didn't want to be remembered by the system. Inside, I found 3 items. The first was a folded school transfer form. The name on the form read Baroni. Ava. Under reason for transfer, someone had scrawled, in handwriting far messier than the rest of the document, home reassignment under private care. There was no signature. No parent or guardian approval. No date filed. It was never submitted. Just tucked away, like a secret someone didn't want processed. The second item was a courtroom sketch, ink and pencil on thin stock paper. I've seen hundreds in my line of work. Artists always hovering in the gallery seats, scribbling outlines for the press. But this one didn't look official. It had no watermark, no media stamp. Just an image, a courtroom with the judge's bench, a partially drawn jury box, and a single figure. Seated near the middle row, hands folded in her lap, eyes focused straight ahead, was Ava Baroni. She wasn't looking at the judge or the witness stand. She was looking out toward us, toward whoever might be holding the image. The sketch disturbed me in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't just her expression, it was how still she was. like the artist hadn't captured her in motion, but had drawn her in pause, mid-thought, mid-moment, like she was choosing whether to speak or stay silent. I placed the sketch down and reached for the final item, the napkin. Ordinary, cheap, white cloth, folded twice with a faint kiss mark at the corner. Lipstick, deep plum. Next to the smudge, scrawled in a bold, shaky hand, were 9 words. He told me not to talk, but I still draw, written in red marker, the kind of red that seeps through napkin fibers. I touched it gently, half expecting it to be wet. It wasn't, but the color stayed bright, fresh, like it had been written just yesterday, not sealed in a forgotten drawer beneath the archive floor. Something about those words stuck with me. I kept reading them, over and over. He taught me not to talk. That part felt obvious. Conditioning, control, threats, maybe. But it was the second part that unnerved me. But I still draw. Drawing is remembering. Drawing is recording. You can silence a voice, but you can't always stop the hand. Not if it's already seen what it's not supposed to. I booted up the old viewer terminal near the back wall and inserted the archive key. A list of restricted footage loaded. Many entries corrupted, some flagged as rehearsal content, others simply named by session. Session 4C, family visitation, internal. Session 6C, deferred playback. Legacy feed, Ava draft, A. Open the first. It was the footage I'd heard rumors about. The one someone called The Loop. The longer version of the meeting between Diddy and the girl. I watched it again, this time with clearer context. He wasn't just giving her a notebook. He was giving her a script. He opened it before her, pointed at lines, urged her to repeat them. She never did. She just stared. He got louder, pushed the book closer. At one point, he stood and moved behind her, guiding her hand as if trying to force her to mimic something on the table. A line, a signature, a mark. She resisted, calm but firm. She looked up at the camera once, only once, but in that second, I felt something shift, like she was watching me, not the lens, not the room, me. Then the footage glitched. The screen went black. I thought the terminal had shut down, but it hadn't. It was buffering. When the image returned, the room was different. The lights flickered, shadows leaned the wrong direction, and Diddy was no longer visible, just her. Ava. Her Ogid. She was standing now. Her hands hovered over the table. Then she turned to the wall and began drawing on it, with the red marker. We couldn't see what. The camera angle cut off. But as she drew, her mouth opened. Not to speak, just to breathe. Heavy, deliberate breaths, like she was exhaling everything she'd ever been told to bury. The screen paused itself. The player froze. I tried to force a shutdown, but the system didn't respond. Only one thing happened. It popped up. Internal viewer logged, playback registered, witness loop reinforced. I yanked the archive key. Everything went dark. I sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the fan blades rattle above me. Somewhere in the distance, a printer was still spitting out legal transcripts. A janitor's cart squeaked down the hall. Then my monitor blinked back on. Not the player. My email. No sender. No subject. Oh, just an attachment. I hesitated, then clicked. It was a scan of a drawing. I recognized the angle immediately. It was my desk, my coffee mug, my laptop, the old photo of my sister I keep taped to the side of the screen. Everything. And me, seated exactly how I was right then. Same hair, same glasses, same hand resting near the drawer. The drawing was dated. That date was tomorrow. On the back, someone had scribbled a line, also in red marker. "You preserved the sketch. You're now part of the loop." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't go home. I just sat there, wondering what it meant to become a part of something that was never supposed to exist, wondering how many more drawings were out there, and whether any of them showed me after this moment. Chapter 6. The sketchbook that wasn't filed. I've cleaned a lot of courtrooms. Most of them don't feel like much, just dry air, wood that squeaks too much, and carpet that never quite loses the smell of nervous sweat. But that one, Courtroom 6, had a different kind of weight to it. Not heavy like drama, heavy like memory. Like too many people said things in there they wished they hadn't, or didn't say what they should have. You feel it when you push the mop bucket in. The silence in those walls isn't quiet, it's thick. They had me stay late that night after a sealed hearing. I don't ask what happens in those sessions. Nobody tells the janitor anything, and that's the way I like it. I get my checklist, I clock in, and I sweep whatever the rest of them leave behind. Crumbs, half-drunk cups of water, scribbled notes shoved under chairs. But what I found that night wasn't trash. It was tucked just barely behind the judge's bench, slipped between the wood paneling and the seat. I almost didn't notice it, except my broom snagged the edge of something that didn't feel like carpet or splintered pine. I leaned down, reached between the rail and the back wall, and pulled out what looked like a kid's sketchbook. Spiral bound, black cover, a little worn, like it had been carried around in a backpack that saw too many days. I almost tossed it in the lost and found bin. Almost. But something about it felt wrong. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't bent or crushed. It looked placed. Like someone had meant for it to be found, but only by someone not important enough to have it make noise. So I opened it. The first page was blank. The second wasn't. It was the courtroom. This courtroom. Drawn in pencil, but with a sharpness I've never seen outside of a photograph. You could see every detail, down to the cracks in the wood grain along the rail, the shine on the bailiff's badge, the loose thread on the judge's sleeve. The next page was more of the same, another angle, from the gallery. Then one from the ceiling, as if the artist had floated up like a camera drone and drawn the layout from above. It didn't feel like someone imagined being here. It felt like someone had been. Every sketch was titled, tiny words in the corners. Scene 1, Rehearsal 2, Playback line. Page after page of faces. The stenographer, mid-keystroke. The public defender wiping his nose. The juror with the cracked glasses. Faces so detailed I could count the pores on their foreheads, the stubble on their chins. Every frame frozen like they were all mid-performance, caught between action and memory. Then I saw one that stopped me cold. It was me. Standing near the front pew, holding a broom mid-sweep. My jacket was off, just my wide undershirt showing, sweat on the collar, headphones in my ears. I was looking up, toward the judge's bench. I blinked, and then I looked up, right there in the moment, heart pounding for no good reason. There was nothing there, just the usual silence, the sound of my own breath. I turned back to the drawing. In the sketch, I was staring toward the air vent near the ceiling. It followed my eyes, looked toward the real vent. It was slightly ajar. I don't know how I missed it earlier. The maintenance team usually makes sure all that stuff is screwed in tight after each hearing, especially in sealed cases. But this one had been shifted, just barely, like someone had pulled it open and forgot to close it all the way. I climbed onto the bench, popped the vent loose, and reached inside. Nothing but cold metal and dust, except a folded piece of paper pressed flat, like it had been waiting. I unfolded it slowly. My fingers were shaking. It was a sketch, and I hadn't seen in the book. Eva Baroni, seated in the center of the courtroom, not in the gallery, not at the witness stand, but in the middle. alone. All the other seats were empty. The judge's bench, the attorney tables, the jury box. No one else existed in that image but her. And scrawled across the bottom of the page, written in bold strokes that cut deep into the paper, "Session 4C never ended, you're still in it." I stared at those words for a long time. I didn't understand what they meant, not fully, but I believed them. That was the scariest part. It felt true, felt already decided, like whatever session had been started in that room was still echoing in the air, and I'd just stepped inside it without meaning to. I slipped the sketchbook into one of the sealed evidence envelopes we keep under the bailiff's desk, wrote down the date, the location, the initials. I didn't sign my name, just the ID number on my badge. I dropped it in the overnight deposit chute and left the courtroom with my cart like nothing happened. But that wasn't the end. When I got home that night, everything was quiet. My apartment always is. I live alone, nothing fancy. Just a couch, a bed, a TV I rarely use, and a fridge full of takeout. I dropped my keys on the table, kicked off my boots, and saw something resting against my front door. Something that hadn't been there when I left. It was a piece of paper, and folded. I picked it up, heart suddenly racing for reasons I couldn't name. I unfolded it. It was another sketch. My front door. Drawn from the outside. Like someone had stood there not long ago and captured every detail. The peeling paint on the trim. The scuff on the welcome mat. The old sticker from a campaign I don't even remember voting in. And down at the bottom, in faint pencil, Scene 7. Playback pending. I dropped the drawing and checked the peephole. Nothing. No one in the hallway. I opened the door, stepped into the hall. Silence. I stood there, breathing heavy, listening for footsteps that weren't there. I should have reported it. Should have burned the sketch. But instead, I taped it to the back of my closet door. Just in case. Because if what they're saying is true, if Session 4C never ended, then maybe none of us ever really left the courtroom. Maybe we're all still being watched. And maybe she's still drawing. Even now, Chapter 7, the feed that leaked itself. This file was auto-uploaded by an unknown user. No metadata, no IP source. Recovered from backup archive. Warning, contains unlisted content pulled from deleted episode of Thread Level Midnight. Recording begins. This is, or was, I guess, episode 91 of Thread Level Midnight. I usually start these by saying my name, the week's sponsors, a few quick disclosures about how I don't traffic in conspiracy, and that everything discussed here is publicly sourced unless otherwise noted. Not tonight. Tonight this file wasn't supposed to exist. Not in my archive, not on my machine, and definitely not on this feed. A few weeks ago, I got a message. No greeting, no sign-off, just a download link and 6 words. Cycle breaker footage, Session 4C, from a friend in records. Now, if you followed me for a while, you know what Session 4C means. If you haven't, here's the short of it. It's the sealed room in MDC Brooklyn. Older than it looks, rewired recently, tied to inmate 37,450-254. Sean Combs. I'd heard the whispers. That footage existed showing something off. Not illegal in the usual sense. Not violent, just deeply, viscerally wrong. Witness accounts. Courtroom files with no origin, sketches drawn by people who didn't remember drawing them. That sort of thing. But this video? This one didn't whisper. It stared. I watched it once, just once, that was enough. The file starts in total silence, no audio track at all, not even hiss or ambient hum. It shows the interior of 4C, viewed from a camera that shouldn't have been recording, shouldn't have even been on, This was one of the analog lines, the ones the prison phased out years ago. Liddy sits at the table. He looks older, gaunt, like the room itself has drained something out of him. His hands are clenched together, fingers twitching like he's waiting for a punch that never comes. Then the door opens, and still no sound. She walks with the same slow, deliberate steps we've seen in the other clips. Head slightly tilted, arms loose at her sides, sketchbook hugged to her chest. She doesn't sit right away. She stands behind her chair, staring down at him. He won't look at her at first, keeps blinking like maybe he's expecting her to disappear. Eventually, she lowers herself into the chair and places the sketchbook on the table between them. What follows is a conversation we can't hear, but you don't need sound to know what's being said. He mouthed something over and over. I had to rewind and slow it down just to catch the words. Did they tell you what I did? I didn't want it to be this. They're still watching. That last one stuck with me, because that's when she raised her hand, not to point at him. She pointed at the ceiling, right at the camera. Not like she was accusing it, like she was acknowledging it, as if to say, yes, I know, I've always known. And then she started drawing in the air, just her finger looping softly. No pencil, no paper, just lines that didn't exist, except they did. Somehow, because I saw them, a shape, a spiral. Diddy didn't move. He just sat there, jaw tight, eyes wide. I've watched interrogation tapes before. I've seen people bluff and break and beg. This wasn't any of those. This was something different. This was a man who had nothing left to say, because everything he might have said was already in the room, watching him back. Then Ava stood up, took the sketchbook, walked to the door. But before she exited, she did something I'll never forget. She turned to the camera, lifted the sketchbook, and showed the final page. It wasn't a drawing of the room. It wasn't a drawing of Diddy. It was me, my desk, my mic, my old mug with the chipped handle, the sticker on my soundboard that says, "Trust memory, not media," and me, headphones on, staring at the screen. Below it, written in pencil, was one line. Playback rendered. Viewer logged. The feed ended. Just like that. No fade out, no return to menu. The file closed itself and vanished from my desktop. And then the lights in my apartment flickered. I'm not kidding, just once. A soft pulse, like the room blinked. I thought it was a coincidence. I don't anymore. Because the next morning, every single webcam I own, the laptop, the external monitor, even the busted one I keep in a drawer, all of them had their red lights on, blinking. No software running, no power indicators, just those tiny pulsing dots. Like they were syncing. And no, now I see her, not in person, in reflections, in the dark edge of my microwave door, in the passenger side mirror of my car when I drive at night, in the frame skip when I scroll too fast through security footage. She's always standing still, always holding the sketchbook. She never speaks, but I hear her anyway. And every time I close my eyes, I see another page turn. And I know, it's my face on the next one. Chapter 8. She wasn't the daughter. She was the recording. I wasn't supposed to get the box. Pearl Record Archives receives hundreds of closed case materials every month. Bundled, barcode stamped, categorized under color-coded tiers, ranging from yellow, public, accessible, to black, sealed, unreadable, untouchable. I was new. Temp contract, summer rotation, no badge clearance, no overtime. But the intake cart that morning had a box no one else claimed. No chain of custody signature, no internal routing slip, just a plain cardboard container with a single label slapped crookedly across the front. Elected testimony. Playback denied. No case number, no date, no return contact. Just those 4 words. Red ink. Slightly smeared. I could have flagged it, sent it to Supervisor Yates, or left it for Monday. But I'd already finished my audit pile early, and there's something about unlabeled boxes that makes you curious even when you shouldn't be. So I peeled the tape back and opened it. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not musty like most old court records, something cleaner, like old paper, rubbed with graphite and maybe a faint trace of lemon oil. Inside were only 3 items. A broken USB drive, one side melted like it had been held to a flame. A sketchbook, worn and bent, spiral binding half unraveled. And a transcript, unmarked except for the title at the top. Session 4C, Witness Redacted, Final Draft. I picked up the transcript and began reading. At first, I thought it was incomplete. There were no quoted statements, no names, no questions or objections. Instead, it read like a theater director's blocking notes. Subject enters room, sits without hesitation, opens sketchbook before being prompted. Inmate withdraws object from pocket, leans forward. Hands tremble. Witness does not speak, maintains eye contact, draws circle, breathes out. Line after line of action, not speech. It wasn't a transcript of testimony, it was a visual record. I flipped to the second page, same thing. Lighting shifts, shadow bends left, inmate flinches. Witness rotates pencil 3 times, draws triangle, pauses. It wasn't what had happened, it was how it happened, almost like the scene itself was being observed through something that understood emotion only through movement and stillness. There was no dialogue, no defense objections, no judge's orders. Just moments, and there were dozens of them. Toward the end of the transcript, the tempo changed. The lines became shorter, sharper. Witness raises hand, points upward. Inmate panics. No sound. Inmate mouths. They're still watching. Witness turns to observation lens, holds sketchbook to glass. Last visible drawing, unknown. I looked over at the sketchbook and hesitated. I opened it. The pages were already curled, some warped, like water had touched them at some point. But the pencil work was untouched. Crisp, too crisp. The first few pages were courtroom renderings, angled perspectives, the judge's bench, the bailiff's desk, the public gallery, all familiar. I'd processed thousands of these drawings over the past few months, but none like these. Each figure in the room, sketched in exacting brutal detail, was seen not from the artist's point of view, but from their own. Like each was drawing themselves watching someone else. Jurors drawing jurors. The defense attorney sketched mid-breath, mid-regret. Even the court reporter, hands frozen above the keys, her eyes locked on something outside the frame. The pages continued like that, scene after scene, but always one girl, always in the corner, sometimes seated, sometimes standing, always silent. She never changed positions, never aged, never blinked. In every sketch she was drawing, and in every sketch no one was looking at her, except us. I turned to the final page. This one was different. A full courtroom again, but every seat was filled. Not by jurors, not by lawyers, but by people holding sketchbooks. All of them were drawing the same thing. In the center of the page stood Ava. Sketchbook open, head tilted, pencil in hand, and she was drawing us. Not the courtroom, not the people around her. She was drawing the viewer. As I stared at the page, something flickered on my screen. I turned. My terminal had gone black. Then a cursor blinked twice. I didn't touch anything. Then text appeared. You filed the recording. You became part of it. Another pause. Then, cycle 10 begins now. The lights in the archive flickered. Not enough to trip the breakers, just enough to remind me I wasn't the only thing in the room. I sat still. Behind me, the cardboard box remained open. Empty. The USB was gone. So was the sketchbook. Only the transcript remained. One page, still on my lap. It was the last entry. Archivist opens box. Reads transcript. Reaches final sketch. Reader stares too long, becomes visible. Article continues. Memory logged. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know who sent the box. But I know this. She wasn't a witness. She wasn't the daughter. She wasn't even the sketch artist. She was the recording, and now she's recording me.